Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the EFL Fantasy Podcast. My name is Angus.
My name is Dan.
I really thought I was going to sneeze there. It was quite awkward. We are back for another episode to review game week 19. But first things first, Dan, how are you?
Not too bad. Last couple of game weeks have not gone well, Gaffr wise. I don't even know what rank you are, Angus, but I must be getting close, close to where you are. I think.
No, because I
Um,
keep getting reds, so I'm running away
oh,
from you. I'm down to 694th.
all right, that's maybe a little bit better
Yeah,
than Angus.
that's what I'm here for this season. I'm just here to make people feel better about their teams and their ranks. So obviously we're going to sort of cover how we did this game week, which neither of us particularly thrilled about, so we'll get that out of the way quite quickly. We'll then go through the sort of team news as normal. We've got a couple of key topics, and then we'll get to your many, many questions you have given us. In terms of the game week this week, I'll go first. I got 83 points, which was another red arrow, which is great fun. Just seeing how bad it can get whilst not actually seeming to be that bad. I had Cooper in goal for 5, Walker Peters 8, Hume 4, Davis 10, Somerville 11, Captain Philogene for 2. All my campaigning for missed penalties to be minus points coming back to bite me. Dewsbury Hall 15, Clark vice captain 16, Azaz 3, Stansfield 2, Rutter 5. I also had Broadhead on the bench for 9. So that's another red arrow. I'm sort of really testing the limits of how low can you go. But I think I did see some boosts around this week, which probably accounts for a little bit of that. But a couple of decisions go the other way. We were talking beforehand, and I said, if I captain almost literally anyone other than Philogene, it's probably looking better this week. Little things like that, just unfortunate, so that's me. I don't really have much more to say about my team at this point. I'll hand over to you to talk about your game week.
Yeah, so I got 90 minus 4 by transfers. I'm starting to build towards Budget Buster. So I brought in Philogene and Kesler Hayden. Kesler Hayden I benched. Um, Even though I think he got an assist this week. Philogene started. Johansson for 7 in goal. Walker Peters for 8. Hume 4. Davis 10. I finally got captain and vice captain correctly. I got captain Somerville for 22. Vice captain Smodics for 10. Clark for 11. Stansfield's just been an absolute nightmare transfer. Even though he's eligible for Budget Buster, he can go. Rutter for 5 and Broadhead for 9. I benched the best player in the league
Yeah.
in Dewsbury Hall for 15 points, which would probably have been a green arrow. The week before, I managed to bench Isaiah Jones's 17 points. So yeah, I'm not doing great. I'm just avoiding points. So yeah, I'm down to 334. I must be on about 5 red arrows in a row or something crazy like that. One, two. Well, I'm on 4 out of 5 red arrows, so not ideal. But yeah, I've still got 3 boosts, so they need to work. My other 3 haven't
Yeah.
worked, so
So obviously not a great game week for either of us. Just before we get into the team news, we'll just cover this off now. Not a great week either for Michael Duff. So we're just going to cover it off at this point because the news broke 5 minutes before we sat down to record. Mixed reaction already I've seen in terms of the early reaction to him being sacked. Not 100% sure what's gone on there. I know their recent record hasn't been great. Thought they would take a little bit more time with it though. But yeah, just thought I'd cover that off. I don't know if there's anything you want to say at this point, Dan, or whether we just sort of leave it.
Yeah, I don't know what more Swansea expected. They obviously lost Piero, didn't they? Unfortunately, I thought the signings they made during the summer were pretty good. Key, Yates, Patino on loan, Timon. Um, but you just get the feeling the fans didn't really settle with Duff's style of play, really. And I think they won 1 in 8, which, unless you're like an established manager at a club, that's always going to put you under a bit of pressure. So yeah, it came as a bit of a shock, but I'm intrigued to see how they go. My guess is they'll probably go for like some like academy under 21 coach is highly rated, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it could well be something like that, yeah. But yeah, don't really have a lot of thoughts on it. Feels a little bit harsh, but I guess it hasn't been great to the point where, managers do get sacked. But yeah, so we just sort of cover that off, or I've just decided on the fly to cover that off. So next up for us is the team news from the weekend. So that's over to you, Dan.
Yeah, yeah, starting on Friday night, watched the game. Um, Preston were 4-2, 3-1. Ramsey was in for Potts. No, Osman Masajic, I'm guessing he's injured. QPR Chair was benched, which was a surprise. Kai and Cook were also on the bench. For West Brom, Jed Wallace, I think he's injured, and Swift was on the bench. Obviously, they're managing his minutes after injury. Leicester, Dewsbury Hall, Justin, Iñárritu, and Ndidi were back in the lineup. For Swansea, Key was still on the bench. Southampton, Manning was left back. I think that's 2 starts in the row for Manning now. Adams was in for Suleimander. Blackburn, Hill played right back. Britton was left wing. Sunderland, Roberts, and Bellingham were on the bench. Burstow started up front. For Leeds, Spence was back on the bench. So if they could get him going, that could be a decent option for Leeds. For Borough, Dyche Steele was at right back, but he got suspended. Banyara at left back, and Latte Laugh is still up front. So God knows what happened during the international break, but Coburn's completely jocked out the lineup. Coventry O'Hare started, Sakamoto and Godden were benched. Uh, Christie started at right back for Hull. Andrews started at right back for Watford. We'll talk more about him later on. Rotherham, Morrison, Hugill were bench. Onyedinma wasn't even in the squad. Bristol City, Vyman started. For Norwich, I think Kenny McLean started at centre back, which was one of those interesting ones. And Lowe's was back in the starting 11. That's your team news this week.
Excellent, thanks for that. I think there is some interesting stuff in there, like you say. I think particularly with the Borough thing with Latalath suddenly being the striker, although he did get a couple of goals, so it's
Yeah.
worked out. Osmajic, yeah, he was a late check on Friday, so I think it's a minor issue, but there was the chance of that. But yeah, so that sort of gives you a bit of an update. So we're just going to move into sort of the key points that we have to cover after this game week. The first one that I've taken on, much to Dan's enjoyment, is we're going to talk about Watford. So obviously Watford have done very well recently. They've taken 10 points from their last 5 games. They had a draw the first of this last 5 against Huddersfield away. They then thrashed Rotherham 5-0, lost 2-0 away at Leicester, beat Norwich 3-2 at home, and then won 2-1 away at Hull at the weekend. I will say that my favourite stat I found researching Watford for this was their game against Huddersfield. The two teams combined for 0.55 xG in the game. So I hope there weren't many people watching Huddersfield Watford in that game. Yeah, I mean the sort of the notable one, I guess, was they gave up almost 3 xG to Leicester, although I know there was a penalty in there, and that always sort of skews things slightly. Couple of the games less than 1 xG, and then they actually gave up almost 2 xG to Hull. So a bit of a mixed bag, sort of defensively in particular for them. But it's worth noting they have done well in this recent run, and there's some players contributing to that, and we haven't really talked about not Watford for a while. We've mentioned the odd player, like we've mentioned Rajovic, and we talked about Aspria when Jamie bought him and Ngakia, and but I think it's worth just sort of revisiting them a little bit, just to do a bit of an overview, I guess, because of that. So I was just looking through some of the stats. I was surprised actually that Rajovic had 7 goals. I'm not sure how many I thought he had, but it was slightly higher than I expected. You then have Martins on 4, Bayo and Aspria on 3, and Kayembe, Ince, and Hoot on 2, which great set of goal scorers there. Assists Loser and Sema on 3. Talk about losing a bit actually, and Aspria, Ince, and Porteous on 2. So you've got 1 goal scoring centre back and 1 assisting centre back apparently. In terms of I looked through some of the stats. The XG, there's nothing really notable there. It's sort of Bayo, and then it's Rajovic, and then it's Aspria, and then it's Martins, which is basically what you would expect. Some of the stuff that contributes to bonus, I did have a bit of a look at. So, for example, shots on target per 90. Leading that is Chakvatadze. I think that's probably because he hasn't played that much, so being more active when he has. And Martins, not that would surprise us, with 1.2 shots on target per 90. And then you have Aspria on 1.1 shots on target per 90. Then Rajovic on 0.8, and then Kayembe on 0.7. Chances created per 90, Chakvatadze is top of that again with 3.3, sort of number that sounds like it comes from playing fewer minutes. You then have Aspria on 2.4, Sema and Loser on 2.3, and Kone on 1.5. And successful dribbles, Chakvatadze is top again, 2.7. Sema 2.4, Ngakia 2.1, Aspria 2.0, and Kone 1.8. I also looked at their points in those 5 games. There's some interesting things in there now. Some of these are sort of boosted by one particular game. But the top scorer in the last 5, do you know who has the most points for Watford in the last 5 games, Dan?
I'm going to go for Jamal Lewis.
It is, in fact, Jamal Lewis, who has 31 points in the last 5 games. Wesley Hoot has 30. And then you have Sema on 29 and Rajovic on 27. One thing that did jump out to me is last season we talked about him quite a lot. This season we haven't really talked about Ken Sema. Just since he's come back into the team, I know he missed a period of time. Since he's come back into the team, he's just like getting on with his work.
Ken Sema does.
He featured in a number of those categories, but not necessarily at the top of any of them. And that sort of thing. He just solidly goes about his work. Um, Worth noting, I know there's a couple of attacking returns in there, but for example, Hoot outscored Porteous by I think about 10 points. And Kayembe with 26, sorry, so close to that Sema number with 29. Ben Hamer, 20 points in his 3 starts in that period. And I note he stayed in the team at the weekend, even though Bachmann was back available, and saved a penalty. So if that stays, that could obviously be potentially interesting. Andrews started 4 of those 5. Obviously, he was a sub in the first one, which was where Ngakia picked up his injury, I believe it was anyway. But he's picked up 21 points in those 5 games, which is solid. But you notice in these games that he is sort of like behind a number of the other players. The other one that I really wanted to mention was just that Jake Livermore has started all 5 games and has 9 points in those 5 games.
And he's played well from what I've read.
Yeah, but in fantasy terms, he is doing absolutely nothing.
That's why he's 4.9 million,
Yeah.
Angus.
But it's like he's not even like accidentally returning or accidentally getting the bonus. I mean, credit to him, he's only got booked I
He's
think
probably getting booked.
once
Yeah.
or twice in those games. Like, I didn't check exactly, but yeah, he's not really doing much. But I just quite enjoyed that. The thing that I thought a couple of interesting notes as well. Imran Loser, 1 sub appearance in the last 5 games.
He's fallen out with a manager, I think.
And I think they've been doing well enough without him. I think the fact that, we talked about him, I think, early in the season as anything good had to come through him. That's clearly not the case anymore. And I think that's clearly had an impact. Aspria started 4 of those 5 games, which I thought was interesting. Kone with 3 starts, and he did come on in the 2 he didn't start, which particularly if you're looking for players, they're either going to start or they're not going to play. He's clearly a terrible example of that. Bayo, 1 start, came off the bench 3 times. Rajovic has started 4. Mateus Martins has come on in 4 of the 5. So he's one who's clearly sort of being brought on to have an impact. And yeah, there's not clear other things like Andrews, Hoot, Porteous, and Lewis is clearly the first choice defence from looking through it. Aspria, Kayembe, Livermore, Sema, they're all going to start most likely. Looks like most likely with Kone and Rajovic up front. So getting a picture from that of like there seems to be a pretty consistent lineup. The interesting thing is the slight disagreement with the goalkeeper there, in terms, particularly with Hamer keeping the spot and then having a good game against Hull. Where does that sort of actually change things now? I know there's been some unhappiness at times with Bachmann this season from the Watford fans, so I guess that's one to watch. But yeah, so that's sort of obviously a breakdown of some of the numbers. What are your thoughts on sort of Watford and the Watford players at this point, Dan? Let's be nice about them.
Uh, I think they're doing all right, but I think there's a lot of teams probably better than them. Some of the prices are intriguing. Like you mentioned, Hamer, if he stays in goal at 4.9,
Yeah,
defensively they've done quite well. Um, I'm going to do a bit on budget buster defenders, but Andrews, if he stays at 4.9, then that's probably one of the better options. Sema feels just too much at 8.3.
yeah,
And it's a shame if if Spread or Martins get in the side and become first choice, they probably would be decent options. Um, and we've mentioned a few times the striker Rajovic, but it's always just Bayo just looming, isn't he? He I'm not sure I could go. I punted away with Stansfield and he's been terrible, so I
Yeah.
might go back to the safety net of the strikers, I think.
Yeah. I think the one that is potentially interesting, particularly as people look for budget ones, if he wasn't a midfielder, it'd be great. Or if midfield spots weren't so sort of valuable, because Kayembe ticking along, particularly with those looking for budget buster, the fact that he sort of averages this sort of 5 points a game, whatever, over the last five. If you were sort of looking for that, that would obviously be a nice little thing at 5.5. Um, for those people with money no object, um, given the lack of defensive options, I would potentially look at Lewis. We talked about him early in
Yeah.
the season as an option, and then he got injured. Obviously, for those looking particularly towards budget buster or sort of looking after their budget, someone like Andrews could be. If not, Lewis, as I said, top point scorer for them over the last five. We've talked about their defensive record. He is someone who's done well in the division before. Has a little bit more attacking threat, I think. So I think he could be. I mean, obviously, not everywhere. Like Wesley Hoot obviously had the incredible goal at the weekend, but I think if you were looking to go in on a defender other than Andrews, it would be Lewis. And I do think, like I say, for those where budget isn't an issue, particularly if you're someone, for example, who still has like ranking Costello, and money isn't an issue, then I think someone like Lewis could genuinely be an option. Um, I don't really have a great deal else to say on Watford. It was just sort of presenting, who's done well, and we hadn't really talked about them for a while. I do find it quite interesting, for example, looking at this, just how little Loser has played. Um,
Yeah. He must have got most of those points in like the first 6 game weeks, I'd have
well,
thought.
in the last five games, he's made one sub appearance, and that in that
Yeah.
sub appearance he scored 0 points.
We got booked,
Yeah.
didn't he? Yeah.
So
I know he's had like late for trading and things like that apparently. So
yeah, but I think the fact that they're able to get by without him at this point probably only makes things worse for him. But yeah, so I think if money's no object, I'm probably looking at Lewis. We're obviously going to talk about Andrews again shortly. Rajovic, I still think is a decent option up front, depending on sort of fixture runs and things like that. We've talked about him a couple of times when Watford have had decent games. They've got a couple of sort of more difficult ones coming up in Southampton and Ipswich, but I think after that you can actually potentially look at him again as well. So, but yeah, I think those are the main ones. And then obviously we said Hamer if he stays in, um, particularly you can leave it for the Southampton and Ipswich games to sort of see how it goes. You don't want a
yeah.
keeper against them. If he's still in goal after that, then obviously, yeah, he's potentially interesting. But yeah, that's Watford. So I'll hand over to you to talk about something that will be interesting to a lot of people.
Yeah, so I think we obviously got the boosts about in this new set, and Budget Buster was one of them, and we know how powerful the boost is. Um, there seems to be loads of options in midfield and attack. Defense is definitely a struggle. We don't seem to have any of the breakout ones we had, like a Bree or a Naismith or any others. Um, some will say we've priced the game too well, Angus. Um, but yeah, so I'm going to run through a few players. I'm looking to play this fairly soon. I'm just not 100% sure of the week. Um, so I'm just going to go through the teams from alphabetical order. So I'm at Birmingham. Sanderson is a centre back. He's 4'9". He seems to be first choice centre back under Rooney. He's played a lot of minutes. Um, the other one there is Buchanan's obviously. I would say he's first choice at left back. Um, Not sure how great he is attacking wise, but he is a wing back, so maybe he has more chance of for returns. Next team is Huddersfield. They have numerous players. For me, the standout is probably Matty Pearson. Um, we saw, well, since the game's been going, that he probably scores between 3 or 7 goals a season. I know Helix scored a lot of goals so far. I think he's got 4 or 5. Um, but set pieces is obviously a focus area for Huddersfield, and Matty Pearson. He seems pretty nailed, and he's 4.9, so he's another one that's a bit of a risk. But I would personally go for him over someone like Nakayama or anyone like that. Ipswich, um, Wolferden. I know we've had a few questions about Ipswich defenders. Obviously, doesn't qualify. Right back, there just seems like Williams or Clark will share the minutes. Williams doesn't clarify, and Clark, um, if you knew he was going to play, he probably would be a decent option. But I think Wolfenden's probably the most nailed centre back for Ipswich. Not sure how great they are defensively, though. They, they seem to just be able to outscore teams. Um, Next team is Plymouth. Um, I went for Kesler Hayden. Obviously, Barney Mumba counts as a defender, but he's 5.7. But he's not playing a wing back, so most of the time they're playing Kesler Hayden or Edwards. They both have similar points. From what I saw, Kesler Hayden's probably a bit more attacking, but he hasn't always got the returns, although he did get a return this week. Um, Preston, we mentioned last week that Best could be an option, but he didn't play at the weekend, which was frustrating because he's 4.6. The most solid one is probably Hughes, but I think he's just coming back from injury, so we need to wait and see if that's confirmed. Um, QPR, can't believe I'm going to recommend QPR players, but they are cheap. Um, I've had Kakai for weeks. I've had to play him a couple of times. He's got 0 points. Frustrating. He looks like Cannon's going to be first choice right back. Um, I think he's an American 4.5. So if he looks nailed, then I think maybe that could be a good option. I know Angus is going to talk about QPR and a couple of other teams in a minute. Um, and then the next one, Rotherham. I know few of us went on Rotherham players. Um, Angus, I know you like Bramall, and he's probably the one that does look a bit like the most likely to score points. So I would suggest Bramall. Um, we need to wait on their manager, but yeah, I think he would probably be the better option. Lembasika seems to be in and out of the lineup. Is saying something when Peltier's getting picked over you is a bit of a worry. And Morrison, it looks like his age. They saw he can't play a 3 game week, so it could get a bit problematic. Sheffield Wednesday, I'm gonna suggest Famewu, just because he's 4 million. I'm not sure if I could go anywhere else, to be honest. Sunderland probably have the best option if he continues in this team, and that's Huggins, 4.5 million. If he looks like he's in the team, he's probably the best option on the budget buster. Would you agree with that, Angus?
Yeah, I think in terms of the like, you could maybe get a couple of better ones at 4.9, but
Yeah,
given the risk of them, I think Huggins is probably theoretically the best option.
Yeah, and then Swansea, we've obviously had the news about Duff. There's a couple at 4.9 who could be interesting. Key, who started the season very well, and Timon, who, if you get it right, you might get his double-digit haul he hits once a season. Um, but yeah, they're decent options there. And finally, as we mentioned, for Watford, Andrews right back. Hopefully, he stays at 4.9 for a while. He's probably up there in top five um, as well. So, out those list, Angus, if you had to pick, I don't know, five, I know it's hard,
Yeah.
it's not easy. Um, any really standouts?
I think, if I was playing it tomorrow, so I knew they were going to be at the same at that price, which is obviously an issue because no one's looking to play it right now. It would probably be sort of Huggins, um, Andrews, and Key. I think
He
those
gets in the team.
those are probably the best ones, at least in
Yeah,
theory. Um, I like the idea of going with a QPR one, although who to go with is tough. Um, it could be Cannon. I think that if it's sort of full week spacing, I think Steve Cook will probably play, so maybe he's the answer, and potentially Jimmy Dunn. So it could be that it's one of those two in terms of safety. Otherwise, it's getting dicey, and I think you only need 3 to 4. But I think, like you mentioned, someone like a Timon could obviously be thrown in, or I think Famewo from Sheffield Wednesday, just because he's 4.0, so
yeah.
he's also the
Afterwards,
one
you can
that you're
just
going to
bench
be
him.
sort of less concerned about sort of holding on to afterwards as well.
Yeah. So there are options. Like I said, there's not as many as there was in previous years. So I mean, it can't be any worse than my budget buster last year. I think I had double Birmingham defence.
Yeah,
So,
the Birmingham defence.
so
Um,
yeah,
yeah, that was a mixed bag for people. Um, So yeah, and I think it is interesting because it is sort of the dilemma that everyone's facing at the moment is looking for these budget buster defenders. So I think it's good to sort of look at them and sort of identify some of these. I will say on Wolfenden, we've seen a couple of times recently. I think if Twanzebe plays, he's probably the one that gets left out.
okay, yeah.
Um,
That's normally is that in midweek though, or
I think it depends when Twanzebe can play because Twanzebe I think is the best centre back they've got. We've seen it before with him. When fit, he's a high level centre back in this division. Like it's just
yeah,
how often he's actually fit. I mean, if you manage to pick one of the weeks that he's fit, it would be great. But it might mean that, for example, Burgess might be a slightly better one because I think he's the only
yeah.
left-sided centre back they have. So it might be him, but that was just the one note I could think of with them.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's a lot of the people said. The other one that I like in theory, although I have issues with the Plymouth defence, is Kessler Hayden.
I know when I suggested to him, you were not very thrilled when
No,
I
it's
mentioned
it's
his
just
name.
that sort of Plymouth defence. I do think it's been vulnerable throughout the season, and so I do think there's that slight issue. But you know, with pickings being slim, when you've got you can't really sort of you've got to take all these options that you can. And with them, unlike some of these 4.9s, that they will be like whichever week you want to play it, they will still be under 5.0.
Yeah, that's a good thing. And they're a bit more attacking threat than some, I
Yeah.
think, maybe.
But yeah, so the final thing that we've just got to cover a little bit is I just want to talk about slight upturn in form for three of the teams at the bottom. Because I do think it's worth noting um, because it potentially has a knock-on effect on what we do in terms of these teams, which Sheffield Wednesday, they've got a draw and a win in their last two. QPR got 2 wins, which is obviously big for them, 2 wins in a week. And Huddersfield, who've got 5 points in their last 3. Now, it's not necessarily saying it's an upturn in performance for all of them, but I do think it's worth noting that upturn in results. And Huddersfield, in those 3 games, they played Southampton, Sunderland, and Swansea, and came out of that with 5 points. That's obviously massive for them. QPR have just gone and beat Stoke and Preston, which is obviously a good week for them. In fact, their only loss in their last 5 was a narrow defeat to Norwich. They had 2 draws before that, though that's with Rotherham, Bristol City, which you can argue about whether you'd want something more from those games or not. And then Sheffield Wednesday, they obviously backed up their draw against Leicester with a win over Blackburn.
I was telling everyone to bet on Blackburn, so
and I think we are starting to see in a few of these games, particularly with Sheffield Wednesday, the impact of Danny Broll.
yeah.
I think their defensive numbers generally have improved since he came in. They do look a bit more solid.
I don't think they were terrible in
No,
all the games,
they
though.
weren't terrible before. Like, I think their overall defensive numbers are sort of mid-table, which if they'd been
Yeah,
terrible before, it would be impossible for them to be there. So that they were fine before, but I think the fact that it felt, some of it felt a little bit more by accident, I guess, under Xisco, which is the whole thing about questioning what style they were playing. Been a little bit more encouraged by their attacks under Roll. I think there's a little bit more of a structure there, which does help, and a little bit more sort of energy, as we sort of predicted there might be. So they are, not even overreacting to the last couple. I think we've been talking recently about how Sheffield Wednesday have sort of improved. So they might be a little bit, tougher to target. I mean, they're still one of the weaker teams. So I think if you've got a good team against them, you're still going to look to go with a player for that team, and they're still going to be an armband candidate. But it's it's decent for them. QPR, I think, is another one we're starting to see the manager's ideas come through. They are one who he's possibly overly sort of solidified them, and they've struggled a little bit in attack. So if they can pick that up, I know Dykes has been struggling in recent weeks, and then he's popped up with a couple of goals. So I think if they can start the goals flowing, not saying they're suddenly going to become good, but they feel like the one that has the talent to maybe make a little move away from the relegation zone.
I've said for a while with QPR, they signed sensible, like Cook's, just very good for professional players. So if they buy into what the manager's saying, you get the feeling. And if Chair and Willock, if they like the manager, you get the feeling that, especially with those 2 players, they've got something going forward where they could create. And if they start keeping clean sheets, they will pick up points. I'm pretty sure of it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Cifuentes also discovered that Chris Willock still, plays for the club, and Smith, I
Yeah,
think, is the other one who has sort of chipped in as well. To credit to him. And Huddersfield, another one, obviously starting to pick up some results. It's not great, but they have been navigating being without some of their sort of important players, which I do think is, has had an impact on them. But I do think the likes of Sorba Thomas and Josh Koroma have, from what I've seen, have done all right over this period. So it's just sort of saying, like, those 3, they have picked it up a little bit recently. I think Sheffield Wednesday, do feel like their defensive record was actually better for longer, but they could be decent. QPR are the ones I think to watch. Dan's smiling because I think he's seen the same thing I've seen, which is
Yeah,
mid-recording,
I can't believe.
Tony
Yeah,
Mowbray out at Sunderland.
it's a
Luckily,
bit
I was
late,
just trying to
really.
round off that segment, but Tony Mowbray gone. We'll cover this now.
Now,
Are you surprised by this? It's sort of felt like it's been coming for a little bit.
yeah, I think this goes back crazily to the after the playoff semi-finals, where like the morning after there was like rumors he was going to get sacked. So you get the feeling that the owners have wanted to do this for a while. Um, they've not really done much this year, have they? With their squad, in my opinion, I th- it's still a decent squad, and they've been massively reliant on Jack Clark numerous games to get them points. And yeah, I think overall the direction they wanted to be a bit more modern and go away from Mowbray. Like he was a good, safe pair of hands, but I think they want to take it to the new level before then get too far away from the playoffs. Because you're starting to see teams pick up like West Brom and things like that. So yeah, I'm not overly shocked, but yeah, I'm intrigued to see who they get because that'll be a lot of managers will want that job.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously we've talked about the talent there. A lot of it is young talent, which some managers will shy away from, some managers will be really attracted to, and then obviously you've got those players like Clark and Roberts, which obviously
Ellingham.
at this level make a massive difference. Um, and so I do think it has felt like it's not been quite right. There's been sort of, multiple reports of sort of disagreements, some of the vision and the signings or whatever between Mowbray and the owners. And whereas I do think that maybe if that's still ongoing and everything, you just sort of decide to part ways. I know there's been sort of some thoughts that he hasn't necessarily, he's, sort of been part of the problem. Um, with some of their issues of sort of, get it to Jack Clark and hope he does something. So it'd be interesting to see, as you say. I think it'd be a very sort of popular job for people, and so I do think that it would be interesting because a lot of the managers around will suddenly be hot after that one, and yeah, I mean they could go any number of ways.
Yeah.
And I think like with some of these clubs, you sack a manager and you sort of know roughly what they're going to be looking for and whatever. With Sunderland, it's like I don't know. So I think
Yeah,
that's
they could go for like a Spanish third division
yeah,
manager or something like that.
yeah, exactly. So I think it's interesting. It's something that's felt like it's been looming over them for a little while, like you say, dating back to sort of the playoffs. So I do wonder if it's better for everyone with the way it's been looming to just sort of get it done and have it sort of over with. But yeah, that sort of we didn't really have any plans for that because
That's never happened before. I suppose it doesn't normally happen at 10 o'clock at night. They don't
no,
normally fire managers.
yeah. So we had one, we were recording at 9 o'clock. We were sort of getting on the call at 9 o'clock. We had a sacking at 5 to 9 and a sacking at 10 o'clock.
Say it
uh,
comes at 3. Who's going at midnight then?
Wagner.
Wagner.
So yeah, so that's that one. So we'll just quickly cover anything else we want to cover from the weekend. Uh, uh, I wanted to briefly talk about the sort of madness that was Leeds Borough, particularly the mad start, but just in general, I think it's two teams that are clearly sort of quite good. Um, and Somerville obviously shining. Pirro with a penalty. I think Pirro, Rutter, Somerville, and James all returned in this game in some form. So that shows sort of what's potential there. And as you said, Latilath, the real sort of hauler in there. I think it's I think I saw a stat. I think I'm going to get this wrong. Anthony Dijksteel has started 3 games this season and been sent off twice.
That's brilliant.
And they were obviously missing a few players, Borough, which probably didn't help. But both these teams doing sort of almost what they do best, probably in terms of going forward. But
Offensively, not so much though.
yeah, it doesn't really concern me with either though. Aside from if any of these injuries with Borough start stacking up for longer periods, that's obviously an issue. I mean, there are extra issues like they were without Greenwood for this game because he's on loan from Leeds and things like that. So, but that's one to watch with them, I guess. Anything in particular from the other games that jumped out to you?
Yeah, I wanted to mention the Leicester game. Obviously,
Yeah,
Dewsbury Hill with a goal and assist, but what were West Brom thinking for the last goal?
I
You've
don't
just
know.
got it back to 1-1. Just take the point. That's a very good point. You're on a good run. I couldn't believe it when I looked up and KDH was through on goal, and then Harry Winks tried to miss it. Have you seen how close it was
Yeah,
to the post? He's had the whole goal basically. But
I
yeah,
was so confused. I was on my way to the Arsenal game. I was so confused when someone said Harry Winks has scored on the break.
yeah, because you'd have thought it'd be, like a few weeks ago when he smashed it top
Yeah,
corner. You'd have thought it like that, but how your two centre mids ends up going clean through on goal, I'll never know.
yeah, but that
Yeah.
was sort of mad. Ironically, with sort of Sunderland thing, I'm not sort of trying to slag off Tony Mowbray again. Honest, I think he's obviously done a great job. I don't think I said that before, but he did great with them. And but the penalty, I have to mention this. Never a penalty in a million years. Defender clearly gets the ball. As someone who desperately needed those Jack Clark points, I'm not going to complain, but
Yeah.
never a penalty in a million years. And Millwall will sort of be fuming about that, obviously, because otherwise it would have been a win for them, which obviously would have been massive at this point in time. Anything else in particular?
Just Plymouth's home record
Yeah.
keeps on going, doesn't it? 97th minute winner. Sorry, Janie.
Yeah, just remarkable, really. And Norwich, Adam Eder, late goal again. On a game that no one was watching except the people there, and I'm not sure many people feel like they missed out, but everyone loves a bit of late drama, don't they?
They do, yeah.
3-4, I think it is for Norwich. So David Wagner turning it around. Give him a new
Yeah.
contract. um, so we're going to get into the questions now. That is everything, unless another team decides to sack their manager. I can't decide whether that be what I want or whether I would actually rather teams just calm down and let us finish the podcast. So we have got, thank you to you lovely people, we have got 21 questions. We will do our best to get through these as quickly as possible.
Some of them we might have answered.
Yes. Some of them obviously we'll go a bit more in depth on, but some of them I think we either have covered or can cover off quite quickly. Chris Hermitage, how do you actually get a green arrow? From the template midfield, who would you say are the main 4 you would want? Having sold KDH, I now have instant regret. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure whether benching KDH or selling KDH is worse. I'm not sure you want to ask either of us how to get a green arrow, though.
Yeah, we just get red arrow.
Yeah. From the template midfield, who would you say the main 4 you want? So that's what I guess it's that big 5,
Somerville,
isn't it?
Clark.
Clark, Somerville, Sarah,
Shrewsbury Hall.
Smodix, and Dewsbury Hall.
I think Philogene might be
Uh,
creeping up there.
he's creeping up there, but I think in terms of that sort of that group is probably the main group still that people are sort of picking from. So if you had to give up one of those four, which one would you give up?
I haven't had Sarah for ages
Yeah,
and he's killing me. Uh,
I think he'd
I
still
think
be the
it
one though.
really depends. Maybe, but I think it's more dependent on your boost strategy now.
Yeah, but I do think I sort of was following along with that game at the weekend, and I think it was a two-goal game for them. He didn't return. He I think only got two bonus, which you say only, but like when
Nothing.
they're sort of it's sort of low for him and everything. And I do think it's sort of like he's the one that you feel like, yeah, he'll hurt you obviously, but like if you, I don't get the same fear being without him. Like obviously he's hurt me, but I don't get the same fear as like when you just say, oh yeah, go without KDH, go without Somerville, like that there's just that fear that fills you. um,
I think benching him is the worst Gaffer mistake I've ever made. Like I'm not even
yeah.
like it's the best player in the league. What am I doing? He just
Um,
doesn't like it when I use the best player because he's
no,
like,
no, I think it's fair. Sorry, I'm kind of getting distracted by sort of the Sunderland stuff or whatever. um, but yeah, so that's that question. Let's get more done. John Jaco, need Armstrong in. Who would you sacrifice out of Piero or Rutter? And who is the best Leeds defender to own with money no object?
it's sacrifice Piero, wouldn't you? I think.
Yeah, I think I'd still rather sell Piero.
Do you know it's gone downhill since I got rid of Adam Armstrong.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you know me. Every time I sell Armstrong, he goes on a run. So, and then the best Leeds defender to own, money no object.
Probably Ampadu, right?
It's
I
probably
know he's a
Ampadu
mid,
or
but if,
Byram. Until Spence gets in the team. If Spence gets in the team, it's obviously him. But um,
yeah,
yeah, one of those two. FPL Frog. Why is Adam Eder only 2% owned? And how much therapy am I going to need when a Saudi Arabian club sign him for £100 million in January? Is that the therapy because Norwich are suddenly going to have £100 million to spend and what they're going to use it on is going to drive you insane?
or the shock of Adam Eder being worth £100 million.
Yeah. Well, when you've got a top quality goal scorer like that they're very valuable. Um,
I think they should just give him a run of games in front of Barnes.
yeah,
Now,
yeah, yeah.
it's got no one else, have they?
No, especially now Huang's injured.
Yeah.
uh, Kyle Stoke Gaffr said, I saw Dan is flying high in the Super League game. Has he gone all big time on us since Luton have gone up? Well, I mean, Dan's been up near the top for basically the whole season. So,
Well, I was up there since I budget boosted
wasn't that game
in
week
game week one.
one? Yeah, I was about
Yeah,
to
game
say.
week
So,
one,
yeah.
overhauled game week two. So
Yeah.
yeah, I had to do it that way because I wouldn't have kept interest, I don't think, because I
Yeah.
don't normally follow European footballs. But Angus will tell you, I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. If it weren't for the pods you and
It's
Chris
like
still, I'd
every
be
time it's
doing.
time to decide something, like what to do, Dan's like, "You doing another pod? You doing another pod soon?"
My favourite one this week was when I showed you my lineup and you go, "Well, you got an injured player." Didn't even know he was injured, or could be
Yeah.
potentially
Oh, that was
injured.
the Xavi Simons thing, wasn't it?
Yeah,
which that's a different pod, but yeah, great stuff there.
Yeah,
But yeah, so no, Dan was still happily watching Preston QPR on Friday night, so
yeah, I was, yeah.
which is more. I had it on the background in the second half, I think, which was probably the right way around to watch it, really. Ignore it in the first half, watch the second half.
Yeah. As soon as chair comes
Yeah,
on.
exactly. Whereas Jamie, who was on about the game making him buy chair, if he saw something he liked, watched the first half, didn't watch the second half, so missed out on the chair masterclass. AD Tours said, "What do you think about playing boosts around the busy festive period?"
I don't even what game week is
I
that?
was about to
That
say it
must be
depends.
coming.
It depends, just when you're talking about playing it.
Right, running up to like the next few weeks. I think you'll be all right.
Yeah, because you've got a couple that are a week apart. So sort of like 22 is the 16th of December. 23
Yeah,
is the 22nd and 23rd of December, and then 24 is Boxing Day. So like if you're looking to go into like and then 25 is on the Friday, so it goes 26th and then 29th. So particularly I think 24 would be a problem. 25 a little bit, but 24 is the one really where it's like if you were looking to play a boost in 24, that's obviously a big issue. And then it does go from, it's worth saying 25, which is the 29th of December, 26 is the 1st of January. So I think if you're looking to play 25, 26, that's another one which is not necessarily an issue. We've seen a lot of these players play sort of back to back games, but it's just sort of working out your spread and how you want to play them because it can be done in that period and everything. But it's just sort of factoring in, okay, who are you picking? What's their spread of games? How many are they likely to play? I think it's fine as long as you're comfortable with an element of risk as well. Um, for example, if you're playing like a budget buster, do you want to have an extra player um, as cover, or are you fine with sort of do you still have good non-budget cover to come in, that sort of thing? So I think it's something you have to factor in, but personally, it wouldn't scare me off playing a boost. I don't know if there's anything else that you would say on that, Dan.
it's so hard because you have to play your boost somewhere,
Yeah,
don't you? And like me, I've not really had a strategy really, and it's probably why I've I haven't picked up as many points recently. So I'm just going to come up with a plan and go with it. Like you can sometimes plan too much, and then even with the good fixtures, it don't turn out well. So I'm just going to pick game weeks and play them, I think.
yeah. So I think particularly with some of those, like I say, it is sort of have a think about it because they do get quite close, particularly that sort of week, Christmas, New Year. They do sort of pack the
Yes,
games
close.
in there. Sean Linus, in terms of chip strategy, they're called boosts. Um, do you think the hits before and after Budget Buster justify the use of the boost? I've had a look at Game Week 26 midfield dynamos, and it looks very tasty with Somerville, KDH, Clark, Philogene, and Smodix. I think in theory, the hits before and after Budget Buster do make it worthwhile. Even in a single game week, it's the one boost where you could say you could score like 180 points or whatever. And so that difference does make it feel like, yeah, like obviously how worthwhile the hits feel depend on how well you do. That's the key thing there, I guess.
Some people played it this week, didn't they? I
Yeah,
think.
I think there were a few sort of things that went wrong there. Kakai not starting, coming off the bench. Philogene's missed penalty. Key not starting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the game week 26 midfield dynamos. Is it Somerville, Dewsbury Hall, Clark, Philogene, Smodix? I mean, that's probably going to be good any week, isn't it?
Yeah. But didn't you say that's in that festive period? So that's
Yes.
the only thing to worry about.
It's New Year's Day, so if you want to sort of be hungover of watching your player, watching your boost either fly or burn, maybe that's the way to go. Add a bit more to your New Year's Day.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know what they're going to put on the TV on New Year's Day. I'm just looking at some of these fixtures, trying to work out what they're going to put on TV on New
Haven't
Year's
they
Day.
announced them? They've announced some of them, haven't
Is that one where they're doing all of them? I forget.
they? I've no idea. Oh, no, isn't it? What's the one that Amazon have? That's Boxing Day, right? Because I know they've got 4 or 5 on the Boxing Day, haven't they?
Oh, you're testing me now. TV on New Year's Day, we have Sunderland versus Preston at 12:30 and 5:15 Sheffield Wednesday against Hull.
Me.
5:15
And I'll
on
be
New
watching
Year's
it.
Day. There you go. Start the new year off right.
It was like we haven't picked Sheffield Wednesday and Hull in a while. I know. Let's just put them together on the TV.
5:15 as well. Not even the 12:30. It's the 5:15
Yeah.
on New Year's Day. Perfect game to slot in before Liverpool Newcastle. Put on Sheffield Wednesday Hull.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know. So yeah, potentially it depends how you feel about the boost on New Year's Day. But those 5 on midfield dynamos certainly seems good. Non-stop FPL. Do we just leave Clark, Sarah, KDH, Somerville, and Smodix or Philogene in our midfield for the whole season and try to optimize the rest of our squads? There's an argument
Yeah.
for it. Is
Yeah.
um, yeah. I
It's
mean,
hard to go against them.
certainly at least 4 of them. You could argue just leaving 5 of them there, but certainly at least 4. You might want to, you know, leave one open or rotate one, like with some of these other players that get into good runs. Like we talked about someone like Swift or Dean Garner when West Brom have a good run, things like that that you might want to sort of
Yeah.
throw in there as well. Is the one thing there. Uh, Eric Ness Onstad. Maximum hits to take in order for Budget Buster to still be profitable.
I think I worked out I'm taking about a -4 each week until I play it.
Yeah, I think if you're taking more than, say, I mean, I saw people taking like -12s the week of, which is the most I would want to take. Like anything more than that, you're reducing the point of playing the boost in terms of the game. I think overall, in terms of setting up for it, you probably don't want to be taking more than like a -16 into it because of the amount of hits you're going to have to take out of it. I think in total, sort of in and out, you don't really want to be taking more than sort of like a -24 in total if you can help it. But that's sort of my rough calculation. George, FPL. I'm not 100% sure on this question, but let's see if you understand it better than me. With this week being interrupted and more chance of knowing starting lineups, etc., do you think it makes sense to play a boost this game week if you have 3 remaining?
Why is it going to be interrupted?
I don't
Have
know.
I missed something?
Yeah, I'm not 100% clear on that. I mean, we basically never know the starting lineups anyway, so I'm not sure that would help much. I mean, in terms of playing the boosts, I guess if you've got 3 left, as we said, you have to use them at some point.
Yeah.
But maybe sort of George can clarify that, because I'm a little bit sort of lost there on what the interruption would be. FPL Calypso, he says, first of all, a fantastic job with the pods being a man down. Thank you. What points would you be looking for each chip boosts? For example, I followed the leader last midweek and got around 50 to 60 points more than the average. Is that good, bad, or indifferent? Thanks. I think it's not necessarily about the average for me. I don't know sort of your thoughts on it, but to me, it's sort of how much did you gain, like just in literal terms, from the boost. Obviously, once you take out what you normally would have got, so for example, your captain would have got 2 times the 2.5. What does that mean, etc. But 50 to 60 points certainly sounds good to me on follow the leader.
Yeah. I mean, my boosts have been terrible. I like that in the game week, to be honest, the way it's going.
In terms of some of the boosts, in terms of putting a points amount on it, it's tough to say. Like, I would say, for example, midfield dynamos, I would set what you would want from each player at about 10 points. Now, if you factor in that you would probably, in theory, doing that captain one and vice captain the other, that means you're looking to gain 35 points. So that's the sort of mark I would say for a good sort of midfield dynamos, for example.
Jeepers Keepers about that as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think in a single game week, if you factor in, I would say, what do we say, about 4 or 5 saves?
4 saves, yeah.
Is what you're looking for from each keeper. So that's an extra sort of like 25 points, and then you throw in an extra half clean sheet or whatever. So I think probably about 30 points from a Jeepers Keepers. So yeah, hopefully that sort of provides a little bit of an answer to that. But it's interesting to sort of think about what you would consider to be good from that. Gaffr Hoops, given their recent good form, which QPR assets should we be tripling up on? And then the real question is, which game weeks look good for playing the budget buster boost in your opinion? Cheers, gents. So just to entertain the first question, if you were going to triple up on QPR, who would you go with?
Powell's probably. Powell and Chair. I know you're going to say Dykes. I can't go Dykes.
No, I can't advocate for it. I know
Begovic?
he just scored. I can't do it.
Maybe the goalie?
Yeah, I was going to say Begovic.
Yeah.
Good weeks for Budget Buster.
Maybe 21. So you got Birmingham, Cardiff. You got Huddersfield, Preston. Who else? Plymouth, QPR, Preston, Huddersfield. They sort of all play each other. QPR, Plymouth.
Stoke, Swansea.
Yeah.
Get a couple in there.
Yeah.
I mean, even 23, say. Plymouth, Birmingham. Bristol City against Hull. Sheffield Wednesday against Cardiff. I mean, if you're looking at someone like Rowe as well, Norwich play Huddersfield.
Yeah.
Swansea, Preston. So there's a few that sort of jump out there. There's it really depends on which sort of the budget players are. Like 24, there's some that fit in there.
Most weeks
25 as
they
well.
fit in, don't they?
Hmm?
Most weeks they
Yeah.
fit in, don't they? It's obviously when you play the budget busters, you're not having the main players, so maybe the best way to look at it is when do they the like the Leicester Leeds, when do they have tricky games? So maybe you can go against them.
Yeah, like do you look at something like 24 Ipswich Leicester, and that's when
Yeah.
you play it as a result, something like that. Um,
23 Ipswich Leeds.
yeah, so yeah, so I mean 2028 is Leicester Ipswich again. They play each other twice in about 5 game weeks. So but yeah, so I think it's most game weeks as we've sort of said there. I think it also depends which teams you're building around. Like for example, if you're centering it around say like Plymouth and Birmingham, that's different to if you're centering it around like Hull and
Sunderland.
Sunderland or QPR or whatever. Like so, I think it
Yeah.
does sort of depend who you're going with. Which is a little bit of a cop out, but as we've presented, like that, it does work in quite a few weeks.
Yeah.
Um, FPL Buddy would love to get some names of Budget Buster defenders if one plays the Budget Buster boost in game week 22 or 23. Refer you to Dan's section earlier. Uh, FF Deacon, with a hard next 5, is there an opportunity to move off Ipswich players to gain an edge, or are they just too good? I feel like we've had this question for about 3 pods in a row about jumping off Ipswich players.
Yeah. So I jumped off a Chaplin instead of Broadhead, and that looked like a bad result. Though Broadhead scored this week, that you can't get rid of Davis. Is
Yeah, no, I think Davis is one of those you just hold him through. I do think, obviously, Broadhead's returned in this game. He's got a 9 pointer. I do think that it's still a run where you can jump off them, but yeah, that run will end at some point, though. That's the thing.
yeah. They're also pretty good, aren't they? Someone picked them to be, was it 16th?
Yeah, something like that. They seem all right. They seem decent.
Yeah, I'm not sure they're going to fade away. No.
Yeah. Well, let's see. The key will be when they lose Morsi and Luongo in from game week
Yeah,
27. Um, Daniel Emanuelson, are there any harder ways to win a box of Freddos than to join FPL Frogs Mini League? Daniel is 17th overall and 6th place in the Freddo League, which is just madness. I might just go out and buy myself a box of Freddos because there's no way I'm winning that league.
they're expensive now,
I
Freddos.
know that's
They're
the
not
problem.
10p
I
anymore.
say this, but like I'm gonna look at the price and be like, maybe not. Petri Ananen has said best defender for Budget Buster, meaning max 4.8 to have some safety. If Budget Buster later, 4.9 defenders can also be discussed, as covered earlier.
Yes. Anyone will think I read the questions
Yeah.
before I decided the topic.
Mel Stars said boost best week to play or strategy. Struggling to get my head around removing good players to get cheap options for Budget Buster in game week 22 to then have to get them back for follow the leader, etc. Is it more sensible to avoid Budget Buster and play follow the leader and midfield dynamos, or is Budget Buster worth the effort?
It's it's good, isn't it, Angus?
It's
That's the thing, isn't it?
it's a bit good. um, I understand the logic from people of saying like, is it really worth it, particularly in a single?
Well,
Probably.
for example, that Kesler Hayden, I benched him. He got 8 points just for a return, really. He'd have got 20 points.
Yeah. It's the whole thing where you think even in a single game week, let's say someone plays 90 minutes or more than 60, that's suddenly 5 points rather than two. It starts adding up really quickly with Budget
Yeah.
Buster. That's the thing. Um, so personally,
All
I'd
you,
say
all you
it's
need is
it's worth it.
like a striker to score three. We've had that one before, and that
Yeah, yeah, we've had that. It's Some people enjoyed it. Some people still have a grudge against a player for it.
Yeah, he's done nothing this year though,
Yeah.
has he? But no, I think you've got to take the risk and go for it. It might not work because, like you said, you are buying players that, in theory, aren't as good. But all it takes is for like a few clean sheets, a few goals and assists, and you'll easily double the score of probably the better players, especially like we mentioned, if they've got trickier games. But yeah, it's part of why this game's so different to a lot of other fantasy. It makes you pick players you wouldn't normally pick.
Yeah, I think
So
that's the other thing. It's like you say, it does make it more interesting. In terms of the best weeks to play boost, we've sort of said, obviously there's things to bear in mind in terms of the time around Christmas and New Year, but it really does depend. Like we could, for example, I could be looking to play a follow the leader on Leeds, Sunderland, and Ipswich, for example, just three teams. Someone else might be looking to play it on Leicester, Southampton, and West Brom or whatever. So it's really difficult to sort of say, oh yeah, this is when you should play things like follow the leader. Midfield dynamo sort of speaks for itself because odds are the midfielders that you have, there's going to be a decent week that falls for them. Um,
yeah,
so I think that one's the easier. That's one slightly easier in terms of and sort of jeepers keepers to a degree in terms of like depending on your keepers, it's more likely to fall into a particular week. FPL Hardman with just a simple question. In your opinion, which team's assets are people underrating at the moment?
um, I think it is West Brom.
Yeah, and as I sort of mentioned, well, I've sort of mentioned a couple of times, in terms of particular assets, I'll mention Dean Garner again.
Yeah, I
Um,
think West Brom are being overlooked for a
um,
number of reasons. They are quite expensive,
yeah,
but I think they're starting to show that they might actually be worth it.
yeah. Um, I think Stuart Armstrong still. Haven't really seen much Stuart Armstrong around. I think he's returned again. Um, so it's just one of those things where he's doing so well, and none of us own him. So um, yeah, it's tough to think of many others really. Just sort of looking through the teams, almost going to Adam Eder. Bears FPL thoughts on playing Jeepers Keepers this week with Dieng and Cooper, or do any other weeks stand out to you? I Who do they even play? So Dieng plays against Ipswich, Cooper plays against Leicester.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think
you don't
there,
hate
there's
that.
there's an issue potentially with, even though Ipswich have a lot of shots, with the amount of shots per game that Middlesbrough tend to give up might be a potential issue. But that's a potential slight issue. Otherwise, I think it's a good week in general for it. Wouldn't sort of steer you away from it. FPL Maverick. I brought the Cardiff keeper, plus I had the Middlesbrough keeper, and played Jeepers keepers away to Southampton and Leeds. The Cardiff keeper was benched. I still got 110 points for the week, 21 points for the one keeper. Did I get away with it?
Probably lost. You have lost
You've
points.
lost points, but it could have been worse in terms of the still getting the 21 points from Dieng. Like it could have been much worse. But yeah, you have sort of lost out a bit there. Ollie Ash has said, deciding on when to play chips boosts, I feel like I've put too much stock into fixtures. Is it better to prioritize players from good teams who are fixture proof, where they are more likely to play?
Oh, I picked Stansfield and he done nothing. So maybe he is. Pick really good players. Funnily
Yeah,
enough, picking really good players gets you points, Angus.
yeah, I know.
Don't bench the best player in the league.
Yeah, genius moves like buying Jay Stansfield because they had two of the worst teams in the league in 3 games and he did nothing. Yeah, yeah, just go with the good players. um, and FPL Maverick also asked, is Adam Armstrong a must-have?
I think he is now.
This is another one that I
I'm
feel
not.
like we've
I'm
had
not
on the
getting
last
him.
like 4 pods, but
I'm not getting him. But
I'm not getting him. But I
yes,
still
he
don't
is.
think it's a
Especially with
must. But it's
Stuart.
getting harder to argue that he's not.
Yeah, especially with Stuart having a setback.
Yeah. Um, I note that it Armstrong did sort of play outside of Adams at the weekend. I also note it didn't matter. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I think unless you're particularly working towards like Budget Buster or whatever, then yeah, just get him in. But yeah, that's all the questions. Thank you to everyone who sent in a question. There were obviously a lot of them there, and I hope we helped you out and didn't get too distracted with the various sort of managerial sackings and that sort of thing. We will be back, well, this weekend now after the game week 20 fixtures.
nearly halfway through, Angus.
I'm completely losing track of all of this stuff. That'll be a quick turnaround though. So we will sort of be back on Sunday. But yeah, nearly halfway through the season, and nearly up to everyone's favourite period over Christmas, where it's all manic and you might end up with like 6 players.
That's not your favourite, is it,
No,
though, Angus?
everyone knows my favourite is coming up is FA Cup third round. Uh, if you haven't seen the way I obsessively follow these games and cross out the fixtures as they are confirmed as postponements for the fourth round, then yeah, you haven't seen sort of the real fun in there. So that's something for people to look forward to, either that know or don't know. Uh, I certainly enjoy it. But yeah, so that's everything. Um, as I say, we'll be back on Sunday because I know it's a midweek game week. And yeah, so all that leaves is for me to say thank you for listening and goodbye.
Right.